I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is the tragic murder of Keith Caneiro and his entire family, wiped out before their sprawling mansion was set on fire. And prosecutors say it was his own brother who did it. Here's the story. Paul Caneiro and his younger brother Keith were in business together. They had a tech firm and a pest control business. In the pest control business, they were equal partners, but Keith owned 90% of the tech firm. Both were living comfortable lives in New Jersey with their families. Paul lived in this nice Ocean Township home, while Keith lived in this sprawling Colts Neck mansion. In the early morning darkness of November 20th, 2018, that mansion erupted in flames and horror. Emergency responders discovered the charred bodies of Keith Caneiro, his wife Jennifer, and their 2 young children. Meanwhile, that same day, Paul's house was on fire. But Paul and his entire family survived. Then came the most shocking discovery. Keith and his family didn't die from the fire. They were murdered. Keith and his wife were shot, and the children were stabbed to death. Was this a hit? A business deal gone wrong? Not according to prosecutors. They say it was the ultimate family betrayal, and they have charged Paul Caneiro with this horrific quadruple murder. This is rough. Could you imagine? Think about the allegations here. A man takes out his brother, his sister-in-law, his niece and nephew, who are just children, in a brutal, brutal fashion. Those are the allegations here. This is blood. This is blood. Blood spilled by one brother on his other brother, and his entire wipes out the whole family, gone. So I want to take a look at the relationships in this Caneiro family. Paul Caneiro and his family lived in New Jersey. A family friend called them all close-knit and unassuming. Paul was a businessman. He owned a $500,000 suburban home, and he had a white Porsche convertible. Paul was 51 at the time of the killings. He's married to Susan Caneiro, and they have 2 daughters who are now in their 30s, Caitlin and Marissa Caneiro. Paul's brother Keith Caneiro was a year younger than him. Keith and his wife Jennifer had 2 kids. These were Paul's niece and nephew, 11-year-old Jesse and 8-year-old Sophia. Keith, the brother, lived in the affluent horse country community of Colts Neck. His wealth was on another level compared to Paul's. This is his sprawling mansion that Paul allegedly set fire to. The brothers started a computer business as young men in 2001. They later started a pest control company together. Paul allegedly stole $90,000 from his brother, according to a lawsuit filed by a family member. The lawsuit alleges that Keith said Paul was not carrying his weight in their businesses and was spending too much money. Keith was going to cut off Paul's annual salary of $225,000. Prosecutors have said the motive for the murders was money-related, but they haven't elaborated. Another possible factor was Keith's life insurance policy. It was around $3 million, and Paul would have potentially gotten it if Keith's entire family was dead. Whatever the reason, it was enough to allegedly lead this suburban middle-aged businessman to kill 4 family members. Yeah, I shake my head because they were successful. They had beautiful, wonderful families. This should have, and here we are, right? This time of year, the most wonderful time of the year, when all those families get together and celebrate one another. And that brings us to the first question in our investigation. What went wrong in Paul and Keith Caneiro's relationship? How did it get to this point, according to prosecutors? Joining me, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor Al Wunsch III, and private investigator Lauren Vellucci. Great to see you both. All right, Al, let's start here. What went wrong here in this relationship? I mean, brothers.
Ben, we just need to look to the Bible. Cain slew Abel. Why did Cain kill Abel? Because of jealousy. Because he felt that he was not as favored as his brother, that he was losing out on the graces of God. And as a result of that, he decided to take Abel out in a field. So kind of interesting because his brother was brought out into the yard and then summarily executed there. So, just look to the Bible. This is as old as it gets. You have a brother who is a ne'er-do-well, who's dependent on the other more successful brother. And then that brother all of a sudden starts seeing that maybe this isn't working well and this is not what I want. And he's distancing himself from that other brother. You just take a look at the two houses. I mean, the sprawling estate in Colts Neck, a very nice house in Ocean County, but there's got to be that jealousy. There's got to be that inside hatred that he is not as successful. He is not as, not as good a businessman as his brother. And as a result of that, he takes him out.
Yeah, Lauren, I want to put this up. This is from the AP, Associated Press, talking about the businesses that they own together. Keith Caneiro was 90% owner of Square One, Inc., a tech firm, with his brother owning the remaining 10%. The brothers were equal owners of a second business, EcoStar Pest Management, both of which were operated out of a single office in Asbury Park. Keith Caneiro wanted to sell one of the businesses and was frustrated with Paul and the amount of money Paul spent from their business accounts, according to the affidavit that they are quoting here. But to me, it seems like Square One, the tech firm, probably generating a lot more revenue than the pest business. But Keith, being a businessman, he's keeping an eye on the books on both of these, and things are going a little funny, it seems.
Yeah, and clearly there was a trust between them because there was a whole lot of stuff going on that his brother didn't know about, but he found out. And to have the accusations of stealing that amount of money says a lot. So clearly he is driven by money, which is telling because we know in some of these cases where there's a killing and the motivation was money, they've done studies, and self-entitlement and grandiosity is often the cause of that, to think that they are just owed that for whatever reason because they want it. And there is just a lack of empathy here to have done this to his family, and it's scary.
It's extremely scary. And Al, when I think about, I have a brother, right? In this case, the younger brother was more successful than the older brother. In our family, it's the opposite. The older, my brother, more successful than me. But in either case, either one of us would do anything to support, protect the other, right? There's that special bond that you have. Here, I look at these two, it's almost more like Michael and Fredo from The Godfather, because the older brother Fredo, who would be Paul, isn't as successful, isn't as smart, right, as his younger brother. And I think that plays into this as well, right? Because I'm the older brother, and you're the one who's got to take care of me.
Well, that's certainly part of it, but then again, Fredo tried to get Michael killed, so I think there's a little bit of difference as opposed to just the business situation. But
but he tries to get him killed, right? He wants to get him killed, and that plays into the same psychology here, because the allegation is that the older kills the younger.
Well, it's got to be probably very upsetting, and I'm sure that there's a dynamic at the older brother's home as to why aren't you doing as well as that? Why is this house not as big as his? How come he's got this? How come he's got 90% of the tech company? Although I will tell you that a pest, extermination business is a very successful business, especially down in that area, because around the shore and things like that, you have water bugs, you have a lot of other things. So they are probably quite busy, and they've probably been doing quite well. But the problem is always the jealousy. It's always why is he getting more than you? You work as hard as he does. Why has he got that sprawling estate? Why are we here? And that has got to be eating at him. And then when the brother starts saying, listen, I don't like the way things are being spent. I don't like the way things are disappearing off these books. And maybe we have to divest. Then you panic. It's a panic syndrome at that point, because now he's got nothing. So that's where this went.
Yeah, and Lauren, this trial, we're expecting to roll out over the course of perhaps 5 weeks. It seems that this is a big part of what prosecutors have to do, right? You've got a jury, and you're telling a jury that one brother killed his brother, his sister-in-law, and stabbed his niece and nephew. I guess they've got to dive into the relationship, the dynamics, and the motive.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? It's sad to say, but I think that a lot of the jury is going to be able to relate to this, not to this extreme, but this is something that happens. Oftentimes, siblings are jealous of another. And I find it very interesting. Each of them had a successful business. Maybe one was more rose to the top and maybe made themselves who they were by their work ethic. One had a wonderful house. It wasn't to the other's standard, but yet that wasn't good enough for him. He was not satisfied with that, and he had to take from his other brother to try to get all of it. So I think the jury will be able to relate on a lot of levels, and this story is going to captivate a jury.
Yeah, to me, this is the saddest of sad, right? Because it's relatable. It's like I have one brother. There's just the two of us, and this would never, ever happen, but it allegedly happened here. All right, Al and Lauren are going to stick around. Coming up next, what role will Paul Caneiro's surviving family play in his trial?
Do you think you deserve to die for murdering those innocent people?
You tell me.
Can you see how damning that evidence is? How do you explain that?
My goal is to make sure that you remember me for the rest of your life.
Oh my God. It looks more like fury than fear.
I feel guilty for that.
You felt guilty because, frankly, you were guilty.
Interview with a Killer. Marathon starting Christmas night, 8/7 Central. Only on Court TV.
This one is the most brutal case that I've seen in my experience here. And I know that the entire team of investigators and people involved in working on this case, the fire officials, that they've struggled with this too.
Yeah, a lot of that because of what happened at Keith Caneiro's mansion. It burned for hours and hours and hours. Those children's bodies, remains after being stabbed to death, burned. It was brutal, but there were 2 fires. There wasn't just one fire. There was a fire at Paul Caneiro's home as well. Take a look. After allegedly killing his brother and his brother's family, prosecutors say Paul Caneiro went back to his own house. And at 5 a.m., they say he used gasoline to set his house on fire. His wife and 2 daughters inside the house at the time. Now, everybody got out, everybody's okay. But there was a second fire that morning. Now, when this story first hit the news, ABC News spoke with the first lawyer of Paul Caneiro, Bob Honecker, longtime Court TV guest, by the way, told ABC News on Saturday that his wife, Susan, and daughters Marissa and Caitlin fully support him and would be willing to testify at his hearing on Wednesday. All 3 escaped the fire unharmed. That's 4 days after the quadruple murder, right? Now, Paul's daughter makes a Facebook post. This is in 2021, 3 years after the murders. This is the picture that she posted. It's her with all 4 victims, her uncle, her aunt, and her cousins. She talked about how much she missed each of her slain family members. She ended it with, "Every day is a struggle without the 4 of you. It will never get easier. I hope I make you all proud, and I miss you most. Until we meet again, love you always." And Caitlin is now 33 years old. Now, more recently, family members have chosen not to comment publicly. The New York Post reported this in an article from September of 2025 about Caitlin Caneiro's Facebook post. Caitlin, a graduate of Seton Hall University who now works as a nurse, did not return messages seeking comment. Her mother, Susan Caneiro, who has since relocated to Toms River, New Jersey, said, "No comment. I will not comment on anything." And that was when the Post visited. So, all of this, right? The murders, 2018, initial response, no comment, brings us to the next question in our investigation. What role will Paul Caneiro's surviving family play in the trial? The surviving family. We have two New Jersey attorneys with us here to help us with this. Still with me, Al Wunsch III, and also joining us, trial attorney Crystal Pettiford. Thank you. Crystal, I'll begin with you. What are your thoughts here about Paul Caneiro's family? Will the jury see them in the gallery? Will the jury hear them from the witness stand? What do you think is going to be their role here?
I think they're absolutely going to appear. I think they're going to appear and testify for the defense. I think their reluctance to speak to the press is probably based on instructions by his attorneys. One would think if they supported him then, they're probably still remaining supportive of him now. And assuming that they testify, they're going to paint a picture of two families that were very close. In the daughter's Facebook post, she presents a family that took vacations together. She looked up to her aunt and she absolutely adored her uncle and her cousins. It's going to be hard for a jury to see like how he could do that, not only to his brother and his family, but to his own family based on the closeness. I think the defense will be pushing them forward as witnesses to try to gain some sympathy from the jury, even though they're not supposed to. They're going to want to paint Paul Caneiro as a family man who loved his brother, and despite the issues with the finances, he would never do anything to harm him or his family.
Al, do you agree? And how important do you think Paul Caneiro's family's role will be in this case?
Well, you know, they're kind of softball witnesses. I mean, they're not going to be able to say anything other than the fact that they can't believe that Dad would do something along those lines. I'm assuming they'll say that. But
how about the fire at their house?
Well, but the thing is this, okay, even that aspect of it, okay, it wasn't a major fire. It wasn't a situation where like anyone's life was in danger at their household. I think that if they do anything, they're just going to stay rote as to, look, I can't believe Dad would do this. We were all very close. And, he loved his brother. He loved his brother's family. That's all they're going to say. I don't think there's anything else, and I don't think that it's going to have any effect on the jury because it's going to be what they're supposed to say. And I think if they were going to say anything negative, they're not going to take the stand. And the state's not going to call them because it doesn't make any sense for them to put them on. Even if the state thought they were going to turn against him, I don't think they would put those people up on the stand because it's a crapshoot as to what'll happen once they're up there. Once they see him, they see their father. But I also don't think they're going to be hanging out at the courtroom on a regular basis.
Oh, you don't think they'll be in the gallery?
For the openings? No, I don't think so. I think they'll be there for maybe the opening, and they'll be there for the verdict watch. But I don't think they're going to be hanging out there because it's just going to be too much of a target for everybody else in there to talk to or to, take out against them for whatever reason. So I think it's going to be, they'll be in for the beginning, they'll be there at the end, they're not going to be there for the middle.
Crystal, how do you think they'll be treated by prosecutors?
Gently, because they're also victims of this, They lost family members as well. His conduct has no bearing on the emotional aspect of what they've experienced. His children lost an uncle and an aunt and two cousins. So I think if they decide to take the stand, the prosecution will ask questions about the business. You love your dad. You're here to support your dad, but you don't know much about the business. You don't know much about the finances. So you really can't speak to the depth of what was happening between the two brothers at the time of the killings.
Al, let's just hypothetically say that they're not standing by their father, and we have no indication that they aren't. But if that happens, right? If that happens, I agree with Crystal. I don't think that's the case. But if that happens, could that impact this jury in some way? If his own wife or children don't appear to be supporting him, whether it's through their testimony or how they, where they sit in the courtroom or what happens there, what do you think the impact of that could be?
Well, Vin, we've seen this happen a number of times, and if I'm gonna throw it down as to what is the percentage of that's affected the jury or didn't affect the jury, it's probably a crapshoot with regards to same. I mean, their lives have been incredibly, in a state of upheaval since this happened. They have lost their family members. They lost their cousins. They lost their aunt. They lost their uncle. They lost their lifestyle. They lost their home. Okay, they're moving on into different directions. They haven't seen their father outside of a jail cell for 4 or 5 years, and under the circumstances, I don't think there's got to be resentment. There has to be resentment towards what has happened to this family. So if I'm on the defense and they get up there and they start saying nasty stuff about Dad, I think I could probably paint a pretty good picture to the jury as to why. And that, their minds have been poisoned by the negative press that's been going on in this country and this state, and that everything down the situation here is that, they've been affected and they're taking it out on someone, and he's the only one, and he's the likely target. I don't think the jury is going to be affected either way if they're pro or con Dad. I think they're going to stay focused on what the evidence is. I mean, we're Jersey guys. We know juries really do look at the evidence here. They don't let their heartstrings go either way. They're going to look straight at the facts. And, like was said, they don't know what was going on business-wise. They're not going to be able to say, yeah, Dad was always afraid the mob was going to come rub us out because there was issues with regards to this, that, the other thing. None of that is going to come in. None of that will be testified by the family.
Crystal, we have about 20 seconds left here. Where do you think they go here? Do you think they're going to point at some other person must be responsible because of the business, because of the money?
I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to try to create reasonable doubt as to that he didn't do it. They're not going to, I don't think they're going to go specifically to one person or one group of people. I think they're just going to show that he didn't have the motive to do it. You have brothers that have been in business for almost 20 years, from 2001 to 2018. And yes, there was a financial issue, but I think the purpose of bringing the family in front of the jury is to say the bond was much stronger than this one mishap. And that's what you're trying to do, create a single doubt, a reasonable doubt for the jury to hang on to. And I think that if I were the defense attorney, I wholeheartedly would want the kids to be supportive and his wife of him throughout this process. I think it paints the picture of the overall relationship between the brothers.
All right, big thanks to Al Wunsch. Great to see you. Crystal's going to stick around. Still to come, are there any holes in the prosecution's timeline? I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the murders of Keith Caneiro, his wife, and his children. A family executed inside their sprawling New Jersey mansion. And the man prosecutors say was responsible was his own brother. Here's the story.
It began with money, resentment, and a widening fracture between brothers Paul Caneiro and Keith Caneiro, men who once shared both blood and business. On a cold November morning in Colts Neck, New Jersey, any hope of reconciliation vanished. Keith Caneiro was found dead on his front lawn, shot before flames swallowed his sprawling mansion. Inside, tragedy deepened. Police say Jennifer Caneiro, just 45 years old, was killed next, along with their children, 11-year-old Jesse Caneiro and 8-year-old Sophia. Investigators believe they were stabbed before the mansion burned, their final moments stolen in silence. Hours earlier, prosecutors say Paul Caneiro lit his own house on fire across town in Ocean Township. A staged distraction meant to blur motive and timeline. Now, Paul Caneiro faces murder and aggravated arson charges as New Jersey braces for a trial rooted in betrayal, rage, and unspeakable loss.
This case, this trial, one of the first big ones of 2026, beginning right after the holiday season. So get ready. Court TV cameras inside that courtroom in New Jersey. This is going to be a tough one, but I think an interesting one as you look at some of the evidence and you look at the motive, and then obviously the emotion involved as you have brother versus brother. For me, when I try to understand a case and a story, I always try to put together some sort of a timeline of what we know, what facts are public in the case, so I can organize my thoughts and understand where prosecutors want to go in their case. So let's take a look at the prosecution's timeline here.
It was November 20th, 2018, at or before 4 a.m. when the tension boiled over. Paul Caneiro allegedly shows up at the house of his brother Keith. We don't know what the two may have said to each other, but prosecutors say Paul shoots and kills Keith outside of the home. He then goes inside, and the morning turns into a rampage. Paul allegedly shoots and stabs Keith's wife, Jennifer, killing her too. He then allegedly turned his attention to his niece and nephew, Keith and Jennifer's kids, just 11 and 8 years old. Prosecutors say Paul stabbed them to death. They believe Paul then goes into the basement to start a fire, the one that would end up engulfing the family's home. It was allegedly an attempt to conceal evidence and throw off investigators. About an hour later, around 5 a.m., Paul gets back to his house in Ocean Township. That's about a 20-minute drive at that time of day. Investigators say there they found evidence of the murders. Then Paul does the unthinkable. With his wife and 2 daughters inside, he sets fire to his own home. Prosecutors say his goal was to make it look like there was some kind of a hit out on the whole Caneiro family. Firefighters knocked that fire down quickly. In 20 minutes, they started to put it out. But over at Keith's house, as he and his family lay dead, it's not until more than 7 hours afterwards, after noon, that fire crews finally respond. The alleged cover-up plan didn't work. Just a few days later, Paul Caneiro is arrested and charged. He's still behind bars.
All right, so let's go through some of the big points again in this timeline of events so we understand the allegations against Paul Caneiro. November 20th, 2018. So we're going back several years here. There's been a lot of litigation through the years. Plus you had the COVID shutdown. 4 a.m., Paul Caneiro goes to his brother Keith's house. 4 a.m. Kills his brother and his brother's family, getting his brother to come outside first, and then allegedly going inside to get the family. Then sets fire to this enormous home. 5 a.m., returns back to his own house in Ocean Township, sets fire to his own house. That gets put out, but firefighters don't arrive at Keith Caneiro's mansion until the afternoon. So there's hours and hours of the fire burning and smoldering. That brings us to the next question in our investigation, all about prosecution's timeline. Are there any holes in the prosecution's timeline? Joining me, former NYPD officer, retired Nassau County Lieutenant and Commanding Officer Mike Gould is with us, and still with us, private investigator Lauren Vellucci. All right, Lauren, I'll give you the first crack at this timeline. Do you see any potential holes or places where you have questions about what's going on here?
Personally, I think it's pretty solid, but I think the defense will kind of question and challenge how quickly it was done. I think it could have been done. I think it probably was done in that time frame, but they're going to have a lot of surveillance camera footage, I'm sure, that they were able to get that we don't know about, showing him driving. Potentially he has to get that gasoline that he used to start the fire. And there's so much more to this, but I do think it's a very solid timeline, and they have video footage of him turning his own footage off at his own house before he leaves to go to his brother's house. So I see no issues.
Mike Gould, you see any holes here in the prosecution's timeline or potential vulnerabilities in telling this story to the jury?
No, I don't at all. I agree with Lauren. There's going to be a lot more evidence coming out. They have ballistic evidence, from what I understand, from inside the house. They have the gun with the ballistic evidence. They have the fact that he turned off his home surveillance camera. So they have a timeline. Again, it's unclear to me why the fire department took so long to respond, but the timelines of the fires themselves are within an hour of each other. So it all fits. Listen, he's got a presumption of innocence, but I will tell you what, this reminds me of Brian Walsh case. This is a evil, if he's guilty, this is evil personified, how you could look into the eyes of two children and stab them to death, which is a slow, painful death. It's just completely mind-boggling. This is not a mafia. This is not an organized crime hit. It would never go down like that. So yeah, he's got it up beyond an uphill battle. I think, and as more evidence comes in, regardless of the DNA, whether the DNA is accepted or admitted in court or not, that'll be a battle of the experts. They'll probably make the evidence neutral, but all the other evidence is going to be overwhelming, in my opinion.
Yeah, Lauren. And Mike brings up such a great point. When you know, it's brother versus brother, but then the part of this case that takes it to that next level of depravity is Jesse and Sophia, these two little kids who probably loved Uncle Paulie.
Yeah, and that's my one hope for this case, is that they didn't know what was happening and who was doing it to them, because it takes a special kind of monster to do this to your own nieces and nephews and your own loved ones' children. I mean, that takes it to a whole nother level. This, just like Mike said, he with it kind of reminding him of the Walsh. This kind of reminds me of Alec Murdaugh. And it's got those vibes going on as well. And in that case, you know, he killed his own son. So these are just these cases of these family annihilators. They really have no empathy for others, and they're only out to gain for themselves. And it is a very scary situation.
Yeah, Mike, picking up on what Lauren said, comparing this one to the Murdaugh case, right? Murdaugh set up this roadside shooting where he became the victim. In this case, there's the second fire. In Murdaugh, there was the second shooting. And I guess in the mind of a depraved person, like, it's, you know, from the outside, I look at it, I'm like, okay, I get it. I get what he was trying to do. Obviously, he didn't pull it off, Murdaugh, but I understand what he's trying to do. He's trying to divert everyone, make it look like they're out to get the whole family. And that's what the allegations are here against Paul Caneiro.
Yeah, Vinnie, depravity is the word for it, and how the evil mind works. I mean, there'll never be a complete explanation. Actually, Murdaugh did a little better job than this. This, as was Murdaugh, an intentional, premeditated murder, right? He planned this. He went there intentionally, and he followed through with his intentions. So yeah, this is just evil, as I said, evil personified. I can't even, we can't grasp it. As I said, listen, I've been to gruesome crime scenes, commercial airline crashes, 9/11. But I can tell you, most hardened investigators and police officers, when it involves young children, it tugs at your heart, because, as I said, you put yourself in these children's position, and to be stabbed, again, it's an emotional, violent. It's horrible. It's horrible. He's not going to prevail as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and you wonder if he stabbed them, Lauren, because maybe he ran out of bullets. I mean, he put like 4 or 5 shots into his brother, and you're wondering, you know, why shoot and stab, and was that the plan? Do you think that was the plan?
I mean, I can't even begin to tell you what the plan was. I can tell you that if he was trying to make it out to seem like it was a hit, there shouldn't have been any stabbing. So he watched too many movies, or the wrong kind of movies. I don't know. But just like Mike said, he will not get away with this. Like you always say, Vinny, we don't catch the smart ones. Thankfully, this guy didn't cover his tracks well at all.
And maybe that's why he only had 10% of the tech company, because he wasn't the smart one. All right.
Yeah.
Big thanks to Lauren Vellucci. Mike Gould's going to stick around. Coming up next, is there any innocent explanation for the DNA evidence?
I'm going to ask you a lot of intensely personal questions.
From the crime scene to the courtroom, this is victim to verdict.
Everyone has this heightened sense of anticipation.
What a day here at Court TV.
Fireworks both inside and outside the courthouse.
Let the cameras roll.
That fire was effectively a ruse designed to make it appear as if the overall Caneiro family was somehow targeted.
Yeah, fire number 2 at Paul Caneiro's house. Prosecutors say it was a ruse, right? It was a way to throw him off. Oh my goodness, they're going after this family. Who are they in business with? Who did they loan money from? What's going on here? Where was this business deal gone bad? Why does someone have it out for the Caneiro family? But prosecutors believe it was a ruse, and it wasn't actually someone taking out or trying to take out 2 different families. Now, there's some important evidence in addition to the fire at Paul Caneiro's house. There's also evidence found in his basement. DNA, take a look. DNA that analysts say is a mixture of Paul Caneiro and Sophia, his niece, was found on gloves and a pair of jeans in his basement. All right, a mixture. His blood, his niece's blood, on gloves and a pair of jeans found in his basement. Take a listen to the prosecution speaking with the judge in one of the big hearings in this case involving the DNA.
Sample 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Everything that was testified to, those gloves were found in the defendant's basement?
Yes, Judge. They were in the same pile as the jeans.
What about this knife? Where was that located?
The knife was located, it was not tested, but that was located in a backpack that was in, I believe it was the car that the defendant's, I believe that the defendant's wife drove regularly in a backpack. We got a search warrant for the car and the backpack as well.
In the defendant's wife's car?
Car, yes, the same car that they drove to the police department the morning of the fire at their house.
What about sample 9, the reddish stain from the south side of the kitchen island?
That was taken from the scene in Colts Neck. So the jeans and the gloves were found in the defendant's house in his basement in Ocean Township. The 3 swabs, 9, 10, and 11, were taken from the kitchen in the Colts Neck house where the victims resided, specifically the kitchen where Jesse Caneiro was found deceased.
Okay, so the judge is allowing the DNA evidence to get in front of the jury, but it's not going to go in unchallenged by the defense in front of the jury. They challenged it in front of the judge, but the judge said, okay, it's coming in. Take a look here. The defense is challenging the legitimacy of the method that was used to test the DNA evidence. So one thing they can argue to the jury is, well, this isn't real science. It's called STR mix. It allows the testing of tiny, complex DNA samples that likely would have been considered unusable a decade ago. This is almost one of those cases where the older it gets, the stronger the evidence gets for prosecutors because the DNA testing gets better and better. The defense argues that the testing could have falsely excluded Keith Caneiro, saying the mixture, it wasn't Paul Caneiro's blood, it was his brother Keith Caneiro's blood. Okay, and that brings us to the final question in our investigation this hour. It's about the DNA. Is there any innocent explanation for this DNA evidence? What can the defense say? Still with me, former NYPD officer Mike Gould and New Jersey attorney Crystal Pettiford. Crystal, what are your thoughts here on the DNA? Is there any argument that you could foresee coming from the defense or an expert that they hire that gives us some alternative explanation for this DNA evidence?
Absolutely not. I don't think they'll be able to come up with an alternate explanation for the DNA. What I think they'll try to do, as they did at the hearing, is try to discredit the validity of the DNA results, try to harp on the newness of this form of DNA testing and the possibility of a false diagnosis or false positive in this case. I don't think that there will be a justifiable innocent reason for any of the DNA, whether it was on the jeans or on the gloves in the basement that the defendant is alleged to have set the fire.
Yeah, so Mike, looking at the nature of this evidence, and some of it, as I mentioned, gloves and jeans with a mixture of his blood and his niece's blood, that's so problematic. Are you surprised because he had allegedly had some sort of a plan here, but the plan didn't include like getting rid of this incriminating evidence?
Right. Well, like they say, Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. So I think what may have happened when he shot his brother out front, they were probably maybe arguing or something, and then everything escalated. It was 4 a.m, maybe alcohol or drugs were involved. But regarding the DNA evidence, and it is new, interestingly enough, it was just introduced, or it's being allowed to be introduced in the Rex Uerman Gilgo Beach killing. My experience, when I testify in court as an expert witness, it's a battle, I believe 100% in what I'm saying, but the other side believes also 100% in what they're saying. So scientific evidence, though, to me, it's so tedious and long. And for jurists to sit through this and listen to, as I said, hours and hours, maybe days of scientific, I can't follow what they're talking about 3/4 of the time. So that might neutralize it. But again, there's so much other circumstantial evidence. But the touch DNA, the STR DNA, it is new, but it has been, it will be a battle of the experts, I think. But I don't think that it's going to really affect the outcome of this case at all.
Crystal, 0 to 10, how important is the DNA?
10. People like what they can see that's scientifically tested. DNA plays such a huge role in these criminal trials. Without it, there's always room that the jury will find that there is reasonable doubt. When you have DNA, specifically with a stabbing of the young girl, and you have it in the defendant's basement, it's going to be hard for anyone to formulate a doubt as to how that could have ended up there.
Yeah, so Mike, you touched on this before, and I just want to go back to it because I don't know where the defense is going to go. But I know there was talk of this early on in the investigation. Could this have been some sort of a mob type hit? Tell me why you believe it couldn't. You have about 30 seconds.
Why it couldn't be? Because the mob is much more efficient. They do, this is their profession. So they wouldn't play around with starting fires. And if they're going to whack people, they're going to do it when they're alone or in a car. They're going to blow up a car. They're going to be far more efficient at this. This was, it just doesn't make sense. And they maybe shoot the brother outside, but they wouldn't go in the house now and start stabbing people. They don't generally stab people. They use guns, they shoot people, they don't stab people because that's an emotional connection. So I don't see where they're going to go with that. I don't understand.
Yeah, they may not. There was a lot of talk of it early on. Mike Gould, great to see you. Have a great holiday season, a great new year. Crystal Pettiford, great to have you as well. We'll see you again. You know, it's hard not to overlook the differences in the lives these two brothers were living. One so much more successful than the other. Paul's little brother with the big mansion. It makes you wonder if jealousy will be argued as part of the fuel that destroyed this relationship and set two houses and families up in flames. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.